A stunning diplomatic privilege has sent shockwaves through the geopolitical landscape at the Palace of Versailles. President Trump has officially signed a sweeping 14 points memorandum of understanding with the Iranian president, aiming to halt hostilities and secure what the White House is calling a peace. But the backlash from the defense hawks was near. Critics are calling it is a massive strategic surrender that hands Tehran billions in sanction relief, lifts naval blockades from the Hormuz, and leaves their atomic ambitions largely unchecked. Joining us now in this breakdown is someone who knows the inner circle very well, who knows what the US foreign policy works, and is closer to the President Donald Trump even more. We're joined by the former White House National Security Advisor and Ambassador of the United States, John Bolton, or we say Ambassador John Bolton. Thank you for being with us in today's special breakdown over the Iran's, you know, MOU sound deal, which has been postponed. I'm getting some information regarding this. Uh, my first question to you, John Bolton, Mr. Ambassador, is that how do you, as a former national security advisor for the President Trump, view the recent deal signed in the Versailles? Because it looked like an historical signed deal we have seen during the World War era. This is the same palace, the Versailles Palace, is the one which you know was the event and a venue for the signed deal of World War. Now it's an Iran war alteration, and MOU has been signed in the same palace, the Palace of Versailles. Is history repeating? And how do you see, as a former advisor and Trump's close ally?
Well, I think the deal is very favorable to Iran, and the one issue that mattered most to Trump, which is opening the Strait of Hormuz, is not fully resolved by this deal. I mean, we'll see what happens. We'll see whether Iran tries to charge tolls, for example, or imposes other conditions on maritime traffic. This agreement does not prohibit that. I think Trump had put himself in a very difficult position. It was clear he wanted out of the war. He's worried about the price of gasoline in the United States. He wanted to release more Gulf oil into international markets to get global prices down and therefore the price in the United States. And he didn't really care what he gave up to get it. And I think that's very evident in the generous terms that are provided to Iran, the restrictions that the U.S. places on its own force deployments in the region, and the restrictions that are placed on Israel, purport to be placed on Israel by this deal. It's more than the Iranian regime ever could have
Mr.
hoped for.
Ambassador, is this a deal a repeat of our structural flaws we have seen in the JCPOA? Is this
Well, exactly. Whether it's Iran or North Korea, these rogue states try to bargain on their nuclear programs in the same way. The first thing they say is, "Give me a lot of tangible economic benefits up front, and in return for those benefits, down the road, I will agree to limitations on the nuclear program." And time again, when people have reached agreements, whether it's with Iran or North Korea, Iran and North Korea get the economic benefits, but somehow they just never get around to putting the restrictions on their nuclear program. I mean, we have bought this horse now 5 or 6 different times with Iran alone, and Trump has just bought it again.
Mr. Ambassador, does this deal risk creating a strategic rift between the Washington and the Jerusalem? Because we have seen a very major point that Israel is not agreeing the White House agreement of what we can say a peace deal. Israel is always saying that he is not a part of a single partnership. That is Washington is calling it as a strategic move by the White House.
Well, I think the relationship between the U.S. and Israel is
Hmm.
stronger than a mistake in this case by the president and the resulting breach in the personal relationship between Netanyahu and Trump. We'll see what happens here. Iran's performance is yet to come, and knowing Iran, I don't think that they're going to do anything to give
Hmm.
people confidence that they'll meet any of the rest of the objectives stated in the memorandum. The fact is that Iran was badly hurt by the U.S. blockade, which had stopped essentially all export of Iranian oil and therefore blocked all revenues to Iran that the regime desperately
Hmm.
needs to stay alive. Once it can sell oil again on the international markets, which is effectively right now, that revenue stream will resume again, and the regime will not use it for the benefit of the Iranian people. It will use to re entrench itself in power, rebuild the Revolutionary Guard, rebuild the terrorist proxy network, rebuild the nuclear program, and the threat that was posed when the attacks began will simply appear again.
Mr. Bolton, has the United States effectively strengthened the access it sought to the contain by allowing Iran to emerge, economically strange or the economically stronger? Because President Trump has already said that if there is no direct funding for the Iran, there is no economical funding for the Iran. Is this effectively strengthening the access?
Well, in terms of Iran's commitment, it doesn't mean anything. You know, Iran has
Hmm.
committed multiple times in the past not to acquire or build its own nuclear weapons. It started in 1970 when it became a non-nuclear weapons state party to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Now, that was under the Shah, but even after the 1979 revolution, the regime said time and time again
Hmm.
it didn't want nuclear weapons, and it committed to that most recently, I think, in the 2015 nuclear deal. Iran is happy to say it won't acquire nuclear weapons. It just is lying when it says it.
Mr. Bolton, we have seen very of the pictures of Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump during the event of G7, which has concluded recently, and uh, how important for the United States India is today in America's wider strategic calculus following the G7 meeting, which has happened recently in the France.
Well, it's not clear that very much constructive came out of it, any deliverables, as they say. But I do think it was important for Trump and Modi to meet again. Trump has always believed he has a good personal relationship with Modi, and I am hoping that the trade issues, the tariff issues, can be put behind us. I personally am opposed to Trump's tariff program. I think it's a big mistake around the world from the U.S. perspective. It's been particularly unfairly applied to India, much more so than to China. And what I really hope comes for the first time is a strategic discussion between Trump and Modi on how to deal with the Chinese threat. It always in the past, in the first term, and so far in Trump's second term, it gets lost in a discussion of trade issues. And I'm not saying trade is unimportant because it is important, but the strategic questions are more important, and that's what those leaders should be focused on.
Mr. Ambassador, is Donald Trump is trying to focus on the G2 world, a realistic recognition of the geopolitical reality, or a dangerous sidelines of allies in institutions like the G7? Is he looking for the G2? Because I'm seeing a very broader way that Donald Trump is saying that Modi is a very smart guy and Xi Jinping is a very good guy. Is he looking for the West versus Asia, or is he looking for another things?
Well, I think it's a dangerous sidelining of India. I mean, I think China's aspirations for hegemony along the Indo-Pacific periphery is really the one of the major issues, if not the major issue of the 21st century, which is why it seems to me that closer relations between India and the United States are so critical. That could come in a variety of ways in bilateral projects and policies in the Asian Security Quad, along with Japan and Australia, which I think is a very important institution. I wish we could make more out of it, or in various other ways. And so it's part of the problem is that Trump's focus is so heavily on trade almost all the time he speaks with foreign leaders. It's hard to get to anything else, but we can see what China's approach has been in East Asia, across the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea. We know of the tensions along the line of actual control with India. This problem isn't going away, it's getting bigger, and we either address it together or we're going to have to address it separately, which is not ideal.
Mr. Bolton, we have seen about the Quad summit, which has happened, and America has been a very tough negotiator with that. Under President Trump, how do you see the Quad group evolving? And should it move beyond diplomacy into the intelligence sharing?
Well, I think there are a lot of potential areas for cooperation that should be explored. I do think it has to go beyond diplomacy, and I think I think it's this is an opportunity to be creative. We're nobody's trying to use this to recreate NATO in the Asia Pacific. It's a very different environment. There are multiple ways in which countries can cooperate, but I do think that the Quad is a unique combination. It was really initially the idea of Shinzo Abe when he was Prime Minister of Japan, but other leaders have taken it up, and I think Prime Minister Takaichi, who is a kind of was a follower of Shinzo Abe, recognizes how important it is. I think the Australians do as well. So I would hope that we could have meetings on many levels, among intelligence professionals, with the militaries, in many ways that would be helpful going forward. And I think there are others in the region that could be invited to participate in it as well, at least for some activities. South Korea, for example, Singapore. So the more creative we are, the more flexible we can be, and the more prepared in a variety of different areas to handle the kind of threat that many people see emerging from China, which thinks through its strategy very carefully, takes a long-term perspective, and has a plan it's working on. We need something in response to that.
Mr. Walton, last but not the least, I would say, how do you look the United States policy regarding the Russia-Ukraine war? I've heard President Donald Trump said, "I have stopped 8 wars." But I won't agree if this is an 8 war. India-Pakistan war was not included in there, but it's an illusion of President Donald Trump, as he's saying. But how do you look at the U.S. policy over the Ukraine and Russia war, particularly given President Trump's claim if it would be easiest war to solve? Why the war has been not solved yet? It's a 4 year, and Donald Trump claiming it's a very easier war to solve. But how? Why is it not solved yet? Donald Trump is claiming I'm stopped the 8 war, which is the illusion of the India-Pakistan war. But how?
Well, he of course was wrong about that, and he didn't solve it in 24 hours either. The G7 declaration on the Ukraine war I thought was very good. I think many people were surprised that Trump signed on to it because it reflects a very strong expression of support for Ukraine. That, I think, is where the great majority of the American people are. Trump may have been skeptical of Ukraine, but I think in Congress and in the general population, there's enormous support for Ukraine. They're defending their territory against unprovoked aggression by Russia. And they've learned a lot of lessons in Ukraine that can be beneficial to the rest of us. They, by dint of battlefield necessity, have developed some of the best cyber warfare capabilities in the world. And many people believe that the Ukrainian army today is one of the best in the world overall, certainly the best in Europe. So there's a lot to be gained by supporting Ukraine, and I think more people should be helping out. I certainly hope the U.S. role in that regard increases. We'll see.
Mr. Bolton, you have seen a Trump's administration very closely. You have been a former White House advisor. Do you trust Tehran commitments regarding the nuclear program? Because as a White House advisor, former White House advisor also, you have seen the Biden's era, you have seen the Trump's era, and you have seen the Obama's era, which President Donald Trump is accusing that Obama helps Iran to build a nuclear weapon, which Donald Trump has halted.
Well, he signed it. That's a mistake. You can't correct that now. But what I would insist is on absolutely strict performance by Iran, and I would focus, because the issue of the Strait of Hormuz is the center of this deal. I would focus on Iran meeting its international legal obligations. A lot of people like to take that as the standard, and the Strait of Hormuz is an international waterway, and that means whether you're a party to the Law of the Sea Treaty or not, there is a right of innocent passage through the strait for all commercial vessels. That means no tolls, no restrictions. There's no exercise of sovereignty. over that right of innocent passage, not by Iran, not by Oman, not by any of the littoral states of the Gulf. And if Iran varies from that conduct, which was the kind of conduct all the Gulf nations engaged in before the war, then I think the
All
deal
right,
is
thank
over.
you, Ambassador Bolton, for sharing a precious time with us. And we always appreciate your time and your blunt insight on these crucial national security matter. Thank you for joining us on this special Zoom interview. It's an historic diplomatic agreement in France, but as we heard as deeply polarizing one that it is really rewriting the rules of engagement in the Middle East, and whether the Versailles Accord deliver the lasting peace the White House promises or strategic vulgarity through its fears remain the same. We'll continue to drag the global out right now. This is our time for the wrap up. I'm Nikhil Kumar Mitchell. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the back.